My ex told his friends I looked like I rolled out of the basement archives and used our joint account to buy his side piece, a $2,200 sculpture. I drained the account while he slept. He called me unstable. I used to think I knew how to carry myself at events like this. Smile, nod, keep the conversation light. But standing in the shadow of the museum's grand rotunda that night, I felt like a visitor in my own life. My name is Kala. I'm 30 years old and live in Chicago, where I work as a museum curator. That night, the gallery was buzzing. Soft jazz hummed from the speakers and donors milled around sipping overpriced wine, their laughter echoing under the vaulted ceiling. I had spent months helping assemble the pieces for this exhibition, researching, coordinating shipments, writing the plaques. And yet, as always, I wasn't the one anyone came to see. Before the doors opened to the public, Jaden pulled me aside. He was wearing one of his sleek charcoal blazers, the kind that screamed status without trying too hard. I already knew what was coming by the way he looked at me, like he was checking for smudges, not admiring his partner. Okay, he said quietly, one hand lightly on my elbow. Can we just try to keep things elegant tonight? No, trivia dumps. No weird facts about pottery being used as early medical tools or whatever. I tried to smile. You mean just talk like a normal human? He didn't laugh. I mean talk like someone who belongs in the art world. Not a tour guide at a roadside museum. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. It wasn't the first time he'd said things like this. Wouldn't be the last. We walked in together, but not really together. He drifted ahead, shaking hands with board members, leaning in just a little too close to the museum director as she laughed at something he said. I stood near one of the Greco-Roman pieces we'd borrowed from a private collection, watching people take selfies with it. I wanted to tell the woman in the red shawl that the sculptor's original tools had been found in a ruin less than 20 miles from this piece's excavation site. I didn't. When it was time for the big group photo, someone called for board members, donors, and key contributors. I stepped forward instinctively. After all, I'd helped curate half the exhibit. But Jaden caught my wrist. Just lightly. Just enough for me to feel it. Let the professionals have their moment, he murmured, still smiling toward the camera. I stepped back. The camera flashed. I blinked against the light and realized my chest felt tight. My eyes started to sting, but I forced a smile and swallowed hard. I didn't want to cry. Not here. Not in front of them. I moved to the back of the crowd and stood by one of the tall marble pillars. A couple guests walked past, their voices a blur. I watched Jaden joke with the collector from New York and wondered if he even remembered I was still in the room. I was invisible. And somehow that hurt worse than being humiliated. Back at home, everything looked the same. Our loft had the kind of industrial charm Jaden loved: exposed brick, steel beams, big open windows that overlooked the west end of Chicago. But that night it felt cold. Like a showroom someone forgot to take down. I slipped off my shoes by the door and quietly made my way to the kitchen. I didn't want to interrupt whatever he was doing, but I also didn't want to see his face. Not yet. I still had that tight, stinging feeling behind my eyes from earlier. I was afraid if I looked at him it'd come back. I heard him before I saw him. He was in the office nook, on speakerphone with one of his friends. Maybe two. Their laughter bounced off the high ceilings. I swear she gets so excited over some broken spoon they dug out of a swamp somewhere, Jaden was saying. Like Kala, it's a stick with rust on it. Not a love letter from Cleopatra. Laughter. Another voice chimed in. At least she's committed to the bit. You should have seen her face at the opening. Totally starstruck by the donors. Oh, and that outfit? Jaden snorted. Straight out of a thrift bin. I told her, please try looking like someone who didn't just roll out of the basement archives. They laughed again. He didn't lower his voice. Didn't say any of it like a joke told in love. I froze halfway down the hall. My fingers dug into the mail in my hand, bending one of the envelopes. It shouldn't have shocked me. He had said versions of this to my face for years, sweetened with compliments, softened with fake concern. But hearing it this raw, this cruel, made my stomach twist. I felt stupid. Not just for loving him, but for defending him to Mateo. For thinking I was exaggerating the red flags. I backed up quietly, careful not to make the floor creak. The next morning, I distracted myself with chores. I fed the cat, sorted mail, opened bills. I needed to keep my mind moving. If I stopped, the words from the night before would start playing again, and I couldn't afford that. Not yet. Then I saw it, a bank statement from our joint account. I almost tossed it aside. But something made me look twice. There was a charge I didn't recognize. $720 to something called House and Craft Studios. My first thought was maybe he bought a sculpture. He did that sometimes, commission modern artists for his gallery. But we never used the shared account for business. That was our rule. Over breakfast, I asked about it casually. I didn't want to seem confrontational. Hey, do you know what this house and craft thing is? Says it came out on Tuesday. Jaden didn't even look up from his tablet. It's for work. What kind of work? Just design consulting. For a project I'm developing. Nothing to worry about. I nodded like that made sense. But it didn't. Not really. And the way he said it, like I was annoying for even asking, left a weird weight in my chest. Something had shifted. I just couldn't name it yet. But I knew one thing for sure. I was done ignoring the knots in my stomach. I didn't say anything about the charge again. Not to Jaden, not to myself. But it kept sitting there in the back of my mind, heavy and persistent, like a museum artifact that doesn't quite belong in the case it's been labeled for. A few days later I was at work, deep in the archives, logging condition notes for a set of 19th century textiles when I finally broke down and told Mateo. We were sitting at opposite ends of the long metal table, coffee mugs between us, papers spread out in the quiet way only two long-term coworkers can share space. I think something's wrong, I said without looking up. Mateo set down his pen. Wrong like, exhibit won't open wrong? Or wrong like Jaden wrong? Jaden, I said softly. Maybe both. I told him about the $700 charge. About the way Jaden laughed at me behind my back. I didn't even realize how much I was saying until I stopped and noticed my hands were shaking a little. Mateo didn't say anything right away. He just nodded like he'd been expecting this conversation for a long time. Start writing things down, he said finally. Every charge. Every comment. Every weird thing. Just keep a record. What am I recording for? Yourself, he said. Just in case. You don't need to do anything right now. But you'll want to have it later. That night, Jaden had a client dinner, so I had the place to myself. I sat on the edge of the bed for a while staring at the drawer in his office desk. The one he kept locked. I'd always told myself it wasn't my business. That he deserved privacy. But now I wasn't so sure. Something felt off. And I couldn't stop thinking about that design firm. Or the way he made me feel so small at the exhibition. I didn't want to be the kind of person who snoops. But I didn't want to be a fool either. So I went looking. The lock on the desk drawer was cheap. It clicked open with the second paperclip I bent into shape. My heart thudded in my ears as I pulled it open. Inside, a folder with receipts. Dozens of them. Hotel bookings, meals for two, high-end jewelry. The jewelry was the worst part. Because I'd never seen any of it. There was a pearl bracelet dated February 14th, Valentine's Day. I remembered that night. He said he had a client dinner and came home smelling like cedarwood cologne and mint. I snapped photos of everything with my phone. My hands were trembling so hard I had to steady myself against the desk. Next I picked up his tablet. I knew the passcode. He used the same one for everything his gallery's opening year. Inside the email app I found a folder called Inspiration. That was where she was. Serafina. That was her name. It felt fake. Like something someone made up to sound exotic and mysterious. But the emails were real. Page after page of them. They called each other Muse and Flame. He quoted poetry to her. She told him she wore the bracelet and thought of his hands. I sat there for a long time staring at the screen. Not crying. Not yet. Mostly just stunned that I had to find out like this. Like I was some museum visitor, reading a plaque about my own life. Mateo knew someone. His sister had gone through a messy divorce the year before and she'd used a lawyer who didn't mess around. That's how I found myself sitting in a narrow downtown office 2 days later, a folder in my lap and my nerves crawling under my skin. The lawyer's name was Denise. She was in her 40s, wore dark-rimmed glasses, and had the kind of steady voice that made you sit up straighter without realizing it. I handed over the folder, printouts of emails, photos of receipts, screenshots of the bank statements. She flipped through it all without blinking. How long has this been going on? She asked. I don't know, I said honestly. The emails go back at least 6 months. Maybe longer. Some of the receipts are from last year. Denise nodded. And your accounts joint or separate? Mostly joint. That was his idea. Said it was simpler. She made a note. You need to start separating your finances. Immediately. I nodded, my hands in my lap. He doesn't know I'm here. He doesn't need to. Not yet. She explained things clearly. As long as we weren't married, the legal options were different, but if I could build a solid timeline and prove financial manipulation, emotional coercion, even a pattern of humiliation, it would matter. Especially if things escalated. You don't need a courtroom to protect yourself, she said. You just need documentation and a plan. So I made a plan. That night, I opened a new bank account in my name only. I set up direct deposit from my job and routed my next paycheck there. I changed my email passwords. Locked my credit. Turned off access to shared apps he might have used to track my location. Then I downloaded a recording app onto my phone. I didn't know exactly what I was hoping to capture. But I knew his tone. The way he turned a compliment into a correction. How he'd say, I'm just being honest right after cutting me down in front of friends. So I started pressing record when we were in the car. At breakfast. On the couch. One morning while we were getting dressed, I asked if he'd seen the museum's new billboard campaign. Just making small talk. He laughed. You sound like a high school intern. You really think people care about that kind of thing? Click. I saved the file. Labeled it, April 12th, undermining comment. Voice tone flat. It wasn't much, but it was a beginning. For the first time in 5 years, I felt like I was building something real. Not for him. For me. I told Jaden I'd be gone for a week. Curators conference, I said over dinner. In DC talks, workshops, networking. Should be good for the museum. He barely looked up from his phone. Just don't get roped into any panel where you start lecturing people about ancient grains again. I smiled like it didn't sting. Packed my bag that night. Made a show of looking frazzled and overprepared, the way I usually got before travel. He didn't suspect a thing. I flew out the next morning. Spent one night in a cheap hotel near the airport in DC, took a few selfies in front of the conference center, posted them on my story like clockwork. Jaden wouldn't check, but just in case he got curious, the illusion was airtight. By noon the next day, I was back in Chicago. Mateo met me outside the terminal. I tossed my bag in the back of his car and got in, heart thudding like I was a teenager sneaking back home after curfew. You sure you're ready for this? He asked. Nope, I said. Let's go. I stayed at Mateo's spare apartment, technically his brother's place, but he was out of town for the month. No questions. No weird looks. Just a couch, a key, and silence. Then I got to work. The first place I started was with the bank statements. Jaden was smart in public, but lazy with money. He used the same 2 accounts for everything, one for bills, one for extras. I already had access. I sorted through 3 months of transactions. Match names and locations. That $720 house and craft payment? It was a custom design firm that specialized in one-of-a-kind interior pieces. The same firm had another charge $200 for a personalized art piece delivered to an address that wasn't ours. I looked up the address. A loft in Wicker Park. Serafina's loft. I confirmed it with one more search, a linked Instagram story where she posted a blurred photo of the artwork. He really sees me. Of course he did. He saw her with money that wasn't entirely his. I created a burner email and wrote to her. Short, direct. You don't know me, but I know you're involved with Jaden. I'm not here to accuse you. I'm here to tell you the truth. Attached were photos of receipts, the emails I'd saved, screenshots of calendar invites for client dinners that matched hotel bookings in her neighborhood. She replied within a day. Her first line read, "Oh my God. We met in a cafe 2 blocks from the lake." She wore oversized sunglasses and a denim jacket that swallowed her frame. She looked nothing like the muse Jaden had described in his flowery emails. She looked exhausted. He told me he was only with you for credibility, she said quietly, stirring her tea. Said you made him look grounded. Respectable. That you weren't a real relationship, more like a good investment. My stomach dropped. She looked at me, eyes wide with horror. I didn't know. I swear. I never would have. Hey. I believe you, I said. And I meant it. We'd both been sold the same story. We just ended up on different pages. It didn't take long for Jaden to notice the money was disappearing. I'd been skimming small amounts from our shared account for weeks, just enough to avoid suspicion. My museum paychecks were already going into a new bank, but now I was quietly transferring bits of savings, little by little. He never paid attention to the details unless it was about him. Until he did. I was at work when I got the voicemail. Kala, what the hell is going on? His voice was sharp, brittle. There's money missing. Thousands. You think I wouldn't notice? Are you okay? Because this feels erratic. Call me. I didn't. Instead, I opened my laptop and organized my files again, labeled each folder, financial, verbal abuse, infidelity, witness support. I added a transcript of our latest call and copied the voicemail to the audio evidence section. That same evening, my phone lit up again. It was Kara, a mutual friend from one of Jaden's gallery circles. We hadn't spoken in months. Hey, she said awkwardly. Jaden called me. He said you've been acting unstable. That you're, going through something. I let out a dry laugh. Right. Let me guess. He said I'm paranoid? Emotional. And not well, she said. He asked if I could check in on you. Did he mention the affair? Or the stolen money? There was a long pause. Then, no. I could hear the shift in her voice as the pieces started falling into place. I told her the truth briefly, calmly. No drama, no raised voice. Just the facts. The charges. The lies. The emails. I offered to send the folder. She didn't hesitate. Please do. That was the first of many. By the weekend, I'd quietly sent evidence packages to 5 other mutuals. I didn't include commentary, just the timeline and files. It didn't need color. The truth was loud enough on its own. The response was immediate. Ruth from the museum board texted, "If you need anything, we're here." Another curator I barely knew met me. "He's been awful to you for years. I always wondered why you stayed." My inbox flooded with quiet messages. Some apologies. some confessions. All of them supportive. The next week at work, I caught Ruth in the stairwell. She smiled softly and touched my shoulder. "I'm proud of you," she said. "By the way, we've been discussing some leadership reshuffling. Nothing official yet, but let's just say you're no longer in his shadow." I blinked. "Wait, are you saying—" "I'm saying," she interrupted gently, "it's good to see you finally speaking for yourself." I stood there stunned, my heart thudding. I had spent 5 years being edited, rewritten, shrunk down to something easier to manage. Now all I had done was tell the truth, and suddenly I wasn't invisible anymore. Back at home, Jaden's messages turned desperate. "Please call me. We can fix this. You're making a scene, Kala. This isn't you." He was wrong. It was me. For the first time, it was actually me. I picked a co-working space 2 blocks from the museum. Neutral ground. Public enough to keep things civil. Quiet enough to make sure he couldn't twist anything into a misunderstanding. He walked in 5 minutes late, as always, with that lazy confidence he wore like cologne. Same designer coat, same air of self-importance, like nothing could possibly touch him. Like I was the one who owed him an apology for dragging things out. "Kala," he said with a tight smile, like we were old friends meeting for coffee. "You look good. Tired, but good." I didn't answer. Just gestured toward the small conference room I'd reserved. It had glass walls, a round table, and a small Bluetooth speaker already paired to my phone. He sat down, draped his coat over the chair, and leaned back like he was settling in for a therapy session he didn't think he needed. "I've been worried about you," he started, his voice soft, almost gentle. "All this secrecy. The cold shoulder. Transferring money without talking to me. That's not like you." I sat down across from him and pulled out my phone, opened the voice recording app, and pressed the red button. "What's that for?" he asked, trying to sound amused. "Documentation." He gave a short laugh. "You're recording me?" "Yes." He stared at me for a moment, his mask flickering. Then the act came back on. "Look, I know things haven't been perfect. I've been stressed. You've been distant. Maybe I wasn't as patient as I could have been. You mocked me in front of your friends." His eyes narrowed, just a little. "Come on, it was a joke. And you took money from our account to buy jewelry for another woman." He leaned forward, his voice shifting. "You're really going to spin this into an ambush?" "I came here to talk, not to be accused." I stayed quiet. He tried charm next. "Kala, I love you. I've always loved you. Things just drifted. We can fix it. Let's go to therapy. Let's take a weekend. Just us." Then came guilt. "I gave you everything. My world. My name. I elevated you, Kala. People only took you seriously because you were with me." Then anger. "You're not some victim here. You've always been dramatic. You latch onto things and turn them into stories. You think you're the quiet martyr, but really? You're boring." He slammed his palm on the table. "You think Serafina wants my life? She was a distraction. You're the stable one. You're the one who knows how to clean up." That was when I picked up my phone, tapped into the saved voicemail, turned the speaker on. "Let the professionals have their moment." His voice played loud and clear across the glass room, followed by another clip. "She doesn't get it, man. She thinks museum trivia makes her interesting." I watched him go pale. His jaw tightened. He reached for the phone. I pulled it back. "You recorded me? You said it." "I just saved it." He stood up abruptly, his hands on the table. "You're going to regret this. You think the museum's going to protect you forever? You wouldn't even have that job if it weren't for it." I stood too. Calm. Quiet. "I don't need your name. I never did." Then I walked out. Past the glass wall. Past the stunned receptionist. Past the exit. He called after me, "Kala, wait, Kala, what do you want?" I didn't turn around. I didn't owe him a damn answer. 2 weeks after the confrontation, Jaden's name showed up in the arts column of a local magazine, but not for the reasons he was used to. The article was short, almost clinical. "A prominent gallery owner's conduct has led to the quiet termination of a collaboration with the Bergman Foundation after undisclosed personal improprieties came to light." There were no photos, no direct quotes, but anyone in our circles knew exactly who they meant. I found out from Serafina. She sent me a screenshot of the article with just 3 words. "I did it." I stared at the screen for a long time. Not because I was surprised, but because I wasn't. Jaden had told her one lie too many, and for once she didn't protect him. He had underestimated both of us. I moved out the same week. Signed the lease on a 1-bedroom apartment 4 blocks from the museum. It had wide windows that filled with light in the morning, and the floors creaked when I walked barefoot. The walls were bare, the furniture mismatched, but it was mine. Completely mine. The first night there, I slept without waking up once. No creaking floors at midnight. No glancing at the door when Jaden got home late. No tense silence in the morning. Just stillness. 3 days later, I ran into Ivy, an old friend from art school, while grabbing coffee near the lake. She had paint on her sleeve and a clipboard full of maps. I thought you moved to LA, I said, smiling. I did. But Chicago pulled me back. I'm leading an installation for the Riverwalk project. It's citywide. They're looking for more collaborators. I laughed, unsure if she was joking. You want me? She looked at me like I'd just asked if I had arms. Kala, you're literally the most detail-obsessed person I've ever met. You'd be perfect. So I said yes. I showed up the next week to a messy warehouse full of fabric, scaffolding, and artists yelling about lighting. I was underpaid, undercaffeinated, and sore for days after climbing a ladder 10 times in a row. It was glorious. On Sunday, Ivy and I met some of the other artists for brunch. Someone ordered bottomless mimosas. I didn't mean to laugh as hard as I did, but it came out full and unfiltered, too loud for the tiny restaurant. For one wild second, I braced myself for a look, a comment, some correction. But nothing came. Just more laughter. Someone refilled my glass. I leaned back in my chair, closed my eyes for a second, and let the sunlight warm my face. I didn't have everything figured out. Not even close. But for the first time in years, I wasn't trying to survive someone else's story. I was finally writing my own.